Again in studio, this time about fiction. Not simple to understand computer programs, but also not simple to understand reality if you are a model or any form of musician. Of course, people should actually behave like they behave, but of course, people are also programmable. So it means you can program people to some point. To understand computers might be extremely difficult for humans that don't understand the simpler rules, but also the safety that come along with programming languages. Of course, a lot of those languages are visual, but some also decorative and some also imperial. To understand simple forms of the C programming is also important if you are building a program for the software. Do not look for any people that are more known because they do not provide safety. It is very important to understand coding safety, but also the structure, together with different forms of rules of any insurance or any health standard company, but also any standard for simple clinics. To understand simple forum with the health is very important, but also to use the logistics together with the Taoism for the better understanding of health. You can use up to 1000 languages to understand Taoism, but not under that because then actually you become vibrating on lower level. So to use around 1000 language for Taoism is actually important, and that's how you also react any intruders or any very known people that have mean purpose with you. To understand different forums, but also to control coding better, but also your life, and to build better statements is very important. Even if you are making any form of professional license lyrics for a music or for speech, it's very important to do some loops, but also to understand control of the studios together with the safety. English language, of course, can build a better language for your lyrics, but also to understand the basic instructions for others that do not practice English. There are infinite loops in the program language Ruby that is also explained in my simple language together with the book. To understand the effects of the ninth book, it's not the same like the third. And of course, there is also the number 8, 12, and 13. To understand different forms of the integrations is not easy, but also how to see different forms of safety line together with the prime number. To understand loops, it's not simple because they are nested in every state in this world, but also to understand simple forms of another models together with the exceptions for some models that are actually more known. To understand general forms is also important, but also infinite coding. Of course, in early periods, there might be some cheats by some very known people, and you should actually avoid them. Those are actually very dangerous. To understand yourself and to begin together with the safety is very important. Of course, safety can build much, much better the circle for you, but also for different forms of the template. With different forms of containers, you can actually build the framework for any of your film, but also safety together with variable purpose for different forms of specializations. To understand contracts in programming is also very important, but furthermore, also the lyrics are important if you are building the fiction sequence. To understand different forms of frequency, to evaluating different forms of partners together with the voice is also important. But of course, in code, you can see that as a form of a noise. And of course, if you will see rich poor, you might act differently, but also the different support for those two. There are different forms of the code in any app, but if you are controlling software, you can actually control the apps also. There are different forms of debuggers possible, but also the difficulty depends from profile to profile. Of course, it is very important to understand the basics, but also the basic C++ together with the template for safety. Of course, some fiction might be prohibited if people are more famous, and it's very important to know that. You will need to use extra 1000 D safety, but also some forms of expression together with the C coding. To build a better Java programming, it's not easy. And of course, there are thousands of programming language that are very, very difficult. To understand different hubs, it's not easy because are related to the different forms of the clients and different forms of company. Of course, you should not build what is the hottest, but actually what is the coolest, because Java and C++ and all those language, also the language that you build in by yourself, are simply not automatic, and you need to actually change them if something go wrong. So you must actually update them every day, but also building simple forms of the code together with the models you are working with. It is not easy to understand millions of type of profile, but also community actually is quite difficult. To understand community and what community want is actually extremely, extremely difficult when it comes to different forms of people that are building songs or lyrics. To understand multiple code there is very, very difficult, but you can also use simple hello world coding, which is sometimes extremely, extremely protected. There are different forms of environments together with the United States of America, but also in Europe. There are some simple forms of Java language. Of course, along those, also different forms of the enterprise. To understand different forms of the security, it's not simple, but also to build different forms of the code with systems or networks. It's not easy to understand different forms of privilege for some coders. And of course, there is difference for those that are also making lyrics. To build more and more and more sometimes become some sort of a scam, and maybe sometimes it's better to understand little forums and to build your own lyrics and not to copy others. To build better numbers in your bank, it's extremely, extremely difficult. And sometimes it's also very important to understand better security together with the numbers and what type of devices the numbers are using. Numbers, banks, numbers, banks, numbers, banks. Extremely, extremely difficult topic. Also, there is a lot of cyber forums, the cyber coding, which is extremely difficult, and all kind of cybercrime is extremely difficult. So you must protect your bank, but also protect it with coding. To understand the different forms of the wars in crime, it's not easy because people are copy other lyrics. For me, it's very important to build security and building my own rights, but also my own lyrics. That's very important also with the code or whatever site you're building. So there is zero crime if you are building your own lyrics. That's very, very important. Also to build simple engineering security, but also different forms of the screens, and also to avoid different forms of Trojan horses. To build a better software, it's not easy, but also assessing better software, it's not easy, especially because you have different forms of extreme social networks that are extreme difficult or even a scam. Of course, if you are a programmer, you can build different forms of defense in your software or in your apps. To secure gateway, it's not easy, but also to build better protections. Of course, coding is very difficult if you are trying to define different property together with different forms of organization. To understanding costs of the code or making simple forms of the scene is not easy, but also the security mechanisms on all locations in the world are not simple. To understand Java, probably you should also understand how the world look like if world would be in category of Africa. Java is not simple, but also different forms of processors are not simple. Can processors work with lyrics? Not at all. It's very important to understand different forms of the units together with the code, but also to build simple devices that are not like other people. Of course, for that, you might need the instruction from the safety department of this film without any crime, without any social networks, or people that are extreme frustrated. To build better software, it's not easy. Like it's not easy to build a better lyrics. To be special type of lyrics is also not easy. But also to building safety together with performance that might take more years to make that extremely well. Making different combinations, of course, make you an artist, but also me as a bookmaker do not think that me is artist, but more a professional of different fields and paths. To understand the following rules is also important, but also understanding the statement all the people in the world should follow me. Of course, with that, you can also get a better guide together with the logic and together with different forms of optimization. To understand simple forms of the circuits, it's important to build your own bank card, but not to be cheaper with official bankers because they are actually scam if you are going on a higher level of coding. To understand different forms of optimization is coming together with different forms of classification. And of course, you need your own minimums to build better lyrics, also to build better quality together with lyrics, but also the quality together with the details of software. If you are building the content, that might be extremely difficult, but also to understand English software basic, English lyrics basic, and of course, the thousands of licenses that are going along that forum. Also, building the policy and limit anyone not only poor but also more known and refuse their deals because sometimes more known are also corrupted. To understand different forums, also to understand fans, sometimes it's very important to understand simple forms of the code. The code can actually support you with different forms of the coding sheets, the frames, but also to build better web for yourself, but also to support others with the language you are building in. Of course, there are also CSS forums and World Wide Web and JavaScript engine, but those are worth nothing without simple forms of the ethics and without simple forms of the code. The code is actually very important. The code is not interface. The code is not a game. Code is not any company. It is very important to build simple scripts so you are understanding the programs and the communication that programs are able to make. Then, if you are ethical and you also care a lot for safety, you can build safe lyrics, safe presentations, safe events, safe company, safe web, safe community, and safe, simple, rich people and better programs together with the safety of the code.